Hello, this is Rick Anderson, and this is the geometry part of the whole syllabus that I cover with zip files for each of the major parts of GCSE maths. This particular one is for geometry, and as you can see there are 17 topics covered in this particular zip file, and I cover those 17 topics in 10 slide packs. Now each of those slide packs contains the same format, and the format is always context, summary, detail, work solutions, then closing questions. So each of the 10 slide packs covers or has a click-controlled slideshow which I've built in. The animations are well built in, so you can control the speed and you can edit the slide packs as well. So there's more detail available on those, but let's illustrate that with one of these parallel lines. So parallel lines. So list of headings, if you like, that we talked about, common format, and then on to where does parallel line topic fit into the whole syllabus. Well, geometry is down here. There's a zip file for each of these if you want, in other zip files that I've done. This particular one is for parallel lines, and of course angles between parallel lines. So I like to say, well, what sort of questions, grade level do you come across? Well, these are fairly, at the easier end of the syllabus, whereas some of the others that I cover later on, like 3D, would be much higher grade. So I always like to start with the idea of a story or something to illustrate things to kick it off, and one of my favourite records and favourite groups was Parallel Lines by Blondie, and you can see the parallel lines, and of course how do you get angles with parallel lines? Well, you have to have an intersecting line. So that's the record. Also I like to introduce perhaps some Disney characters as well sometimes, and just say this really is a very important part of the syllabus. And the idea of the letters, which we'll see in a minute. Okay, so we can also see the summary now of what we're going to talk about, definitions, what is a parallel line and how do you get angles, what are the methods you use to solve the problems, what are the things like alternate angles and Z-shape. Resources will often link to a quiz, maybe a bite-sized quiz, straightforward numerical questions, more wordy applied questions, and final tips. If we then, just before we go, just the idea that a lot of geometry problems really are about, I think, Sherlock Holmes looking for clues to solve the crime, so to speak. So in terms of definitions, really just the idea of what is an alternate angle, what is a corresponding angle, and so forth. What sort of problems are you going to see? Well, you might be asked to either find an angle or perhaps do a proof, and then this is just the introduction to a simple method for solving problems to find an angle, and also the idea that algebra sometimes comes into geometry as well with X. If we then look at the detailed golden rules that you need to learn, the vertically opposite and the straight line, obviously not particularly parallel line angles rule, but they do still come into many parallel line angle problems. The three key rules then: alternate angles, corresponding angles, allied angles, and use of the letters there, and also the idea here that if you know an angle A, you can get any angle quite easily on a pair of parallel lines with an intersection. And so then just some questions, typical simple questions, applied questions, then some tips at the end, and on to some questions. And if you look at the simple questions, just a very, very simple question, and gradually reveal the answer and emphasize that you have to state the reason when you're doing a question. Slightly more difficult question here, find the angles R and V, and again, which rules are you going to use, gradually reveal the methods and the particular rules, and work through, and all I'm doing is clicking, you could go any speed you want. And then the next set of questions is a proof, proof of a rule. And I like to do proofs as well. And then finally, a bit of parallel line question with algebra. Not necessarily X and Y, could be J and K in this case. But gradually work through the methods, work through the solutions until you come to the final answer. and also I like to have the idea of checking answers as well. And then on finally to another question on this sheet, another parallel line angle question, and the idea that if you want the information at this end, most of the starting information is at that end. Well, how do you connect? Well, in this case you use the parallel line angle rules. Now, I then close often with some fast and furious questions just to check that the pupils have understood. Okay, thank you very much.